While South Africa has made great strides since the dawn of democracy in 1994, inequality, poverty and unemployment, that triple threat, are still prevalent in the country as it continues to heal from the legacy of apartheid. And this morning, as we continue to reflect on our journey over the past 31 years of freedom, we take a broader look at how deepening levels of social inequality have created despondency for citizens. And to help us unpack this, we joined virtually now by Dr. Allan Boesak, a Cleric and anti-apartheid activist. Dr. Boesak, great to have you with us here on Morning Live. Welcome to it.
Thank you, Sakina. Good to see you again, and good morning to all your listeners on this day.
Thanks so much for giving us your time on this Freedom Day holiday, Dr. Boesak. And just looking back at South Africa and where we find ourselves today, as someone who was there at the forefront of the freedom for this democracy, as we celebrate Freedom Day, it obviously reminds us of some really hard-won victories that were paid for in blood many a time. How would you define the meaning of freedom today compared to the dream that you fought for all those decades ago?
Well, when we talked about this last year in public, I was very despondent, and I still am even more so today. I mean, you talk about the years of struggle and sacrifice, and we were not just talking about the years that I was privileged to be in the struggle, but a struggle that had gone on for more than a century before. So we're talking about a sacrifice of the whole people over a very long period of time. And at that time last year, we spoke of 50 years of betrayal. For me today, looking back at what has happened in the past year, and seeing the consequences of what that betrayal actually means, it is filled with a very painful irony, Sakina. And the irony is this question: now that we have the GNU, does that mean that we are the only people in the world who have fought our oppressors, won the battle, and then after 50 years, we turn back to our oppressors and ask them, please, will you rescue us from ourselves and our mistakes and our misrule and our inability to serve our people in the right way? To me, that is a tragedy that we should ask that question, but I'm afraid that's the question we have to look into the eye today.
So when we talk about this government of national unity and how we got to find ourselves here, you know, you speak of the misrule over the past 31 years. Where do you think it all went wrong?
There are two ways in which it went wrong. I always come back, after having thought about it for a long time, that I think the fundamental roots of the problems that we are facing now lies in those secret talks between 1985 and 1989 that the elites of the ANC held with the elite of the old white capitalist apartheid system. They then came to some agreement as to how the country would run, how power would be understood, how power would be shared. But fundamentally, white people with their economic power and their experience and their confidence would remain in power. We would have what I called a taste of power. We would have the trappings of power in parliament with elections and so forth. But the real power will remain in the hands of those people who run the economy. And that's the white people with their generational build-up of capital and international solidarity and links and connections and so forth. And so that was, and in those meetings over those years, that's where the foundation for South Africa was laid. And it means that we are about a new liberal capitalist system which suits them much better, to an electoral system which suited them much better. And we, our people, went in with our sacrifices, with our dreams and our ideals. And I almost have the feeling that we can say now the betrayal comes from the fact that we have been hoodwinked. I can also say that in my view, those agreements that had been made beforehand, by the time we got to CODESA, one can then describe CODESA as mere political theater and not where the real exchange of ideas and visions for the future and therefore also power took place.
So at the time of that transition, there was very much still a culture of activism. And we listen to young people today when you speak of this betrayal, Dr. Boesak. Young people always talk about being sold out, their dreams, their future being sold. But can we be more specific in terms of exactly how we were hoodwinked? And if we were hoodwinked at that point, why didn't people like yourself, like others who were at the forefront at the time, point that out to the masses and fight it? Because one could then argue that spiraled to where we find ourselves today.
Well, it's always a good question. I don't think it's always a fair question, depending on to whom, because young people are now saying to me, yeah, Mandela was a seller. And I say to them, always be very careful, be more cautious when you talk about that. But what I'm thinking of, the sell-out idea makes sense. If you think that, say now, for instance, economically, we build our dreams and hopes for the future, planning to follow the Freedom Charter, which was a more mixed socialist economy, not the new liberal capitalist economy that we embraced so eagerly in those sites, and that became the policy of the land after 1994, at least a continuation of the policy. That's number one. We had very different ideas of the redistribution of the land while we were struggling, and we went into that with the 1994 idea. Nothing came of that by design, because the African National Congress built it into the Constitution in that Article 25, which is the longest article in our Constitution, which makes it impossible to talk about returning the land to the owners of the land while that article still remains. We did not take into account the fact that when you have power in the hands of people in office, that we would have people in office who look like us, but who would actually do the bidding of those people behind the scenes because they are able to be bought off. Now, when you think about those, if you think about education, if you think about what we fought for in terms of non-racialism, here we come after 20 years of the Black Consciousness movement and especially the United Democratic Front, which was the very embodiment of non-racialism in South Africa and still one of my strongest ideas in the world. I think that we are now a racially divided, more so than ever, a re-racialized society. The African National Congress took me back and really, as a colored person, they claimed Africanness for something else. So my Khoi ancestors and I, as a descendant of the first Africans of this continent, cannot claim myself as an African. It is such a wrong, such a fundamentally wrong idea. And so our social cohesion is not only hampered by that, it is further shattered by the social inequalities that are an inevitable consequence of neoliberal capitalism. And so we are as far away from what we thought freedom would be as we can be 31 years later.
So what would you say to young people, the majority of whom are born after 1994, born into democracy, into freedom? How would you speak to them today to give them a sense of hope for where this country is going, especially under the current socio-economic conditions that they find themselves in, high levels of unemployment, many of them very despondent?
I talk to young people often in schools and in conferences and at churches and so forth. And I always try to say this to them. I do not try to make excuses for us. We fought a real noble battle. And we fought battle. I tell young people, we had a revolution. One of the first things that you must be vigilant about is do not let your revolution be stolen or hijacked by people who pretend to be your liberators and your leaders. That's number one. Number two, I remind them of what the struggle was. I remind them of what the young people used to be able to do, the sacrifices that they made, the consistency of their courage, the contagiousness of their courage, the way they were willing to sacrifice everything, including their lives. And then I say to them, it's not to make you feel as if you cannot do that. I'm reminding you of this because that is your DNA. That's who you are. It's in you. So if you open your eyes, if you are willing to say, the thing that we must understand is the revolution might have been stolen by those in power and pretending that it's their revolution now, but we can take it back because it is in our power to take it back. Don't ever give up. As long as there is one young person whose dreams are not fulfilled, whose hopes and aspirations are not becoming real, then there is something to fight for. And I am trying to say to them, I can't fight the way you fight these days. I'm not 21 anymore, but I will fight as much as I can next to you, by your side, because I still believe passionately and the things that we believed in, that we fought for, and I still believe that those things are meant for South Africa. This what we have now, Sakina, it's not our destiny. So we have to reshape our reality in order to reclaim only our revolution, but also our destiny. And I think that is possible.
Dr. Allan Boesak, I wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we don't. We have to leave it there. But thank you so much for your reflections, Dr. Allan Boesak, reflecting on the history of South Africa's freedom and the strides that have been made to achieve economic opportunity or not, and social cohesion, which Dr. Boesak says we've regressed on. So